I used to think my family was dysfunctional in that charming, sitcom kind of way. You know, awkward dinners, passive-aggressive comments over the mashed potatoes, that one uncle who drinks too much wine and starts rambling about government conspiracies. But there was still a sense of belonging, or so I told myself for 25 years. My name's Jake. I'm 28 now, and I'm finally ready to talk about what really happened at my grandmother's while reading. The day my entire world cracked open like a rotten egg, and the stench of who my family really was finally hit me in the face. Grandma Eleanor was the matriarch. Not just in name or age, she was the figurehead, the gravity that kept our bizarre constellation of relatives in orbit. Every major family holiday happened at her lake house. Every argument was settled by her word. Every one of us, from my lawyer uncle with 3 ex-wives to my weird cousin Danny who still lived in her basement, treated her like some royal figure. She'd raised 5 children, buried 1, and survived 2 strokes. And through it all, she managed to write me a birthday letter every year, never missing a single one since I was old enough to read. They were short, sweet, always signed in the same slightly shaky cursive. So when she passed, I believed, that I, of all people, would be remembered. My mom, her eldest daughter, used to tell me I was Grandma's sweet little Jake. Even well into my teenage years. We used to sit on the porch swing together at the lake, sipping sweet tea while everyone else was inside fighting over who overcooked the ham. She'd tell me stories, real ones, raw ones, about growing up during the war, about love letters she never sent, about the time she almost ran away to New York to become a stage actress. I thought she shared those things with me because I was the only one who truly listened. Turns out, maybe I was just the only one available. When she passed away, I was one of the few who didn't break down. Don't get me wrong. I was crushed, hollowed out in a way I hadn't expected, but I held it in. At the funeral, my cousins cried into embroidered tissues, my aunts clung to each other, and my uncle gave some weirdly tone-deaf speech about estate taxes. I sat in the back of the chapel alone, clutching the last letter she ever sent me. "We'll talk soon." It ended. She died 2 days later. The reading of the will happened a month later in a stuffy conference room that smelled like old books and stale air. The lawyer, Mr. Hardwick, had been in our family's life since before I was born. He was the kind of man who wore glasses on a chain and used words like provisions and executor, like he was reading from a Dickens novel. My mom sat next to me, her hand occasionally squeezing mine, like she could already feel the weight of the inheritance she assumed was coming. They all assumed, actually. You could see it in the way they sat, shoulders pulled back, eyes gleaming like crows circling something dead. Aunt Meredith had even worn a navy blue blazer, as if dressing like a businesswoman might earn her an extra slice of the pie. Cousin Rachel had her fiancé with her, some real estate guy with a jaw like a shovel, who whispered things into her ear and nodded, like they were at an auction previewing their lot. Nobody really looked at me. Mr. Hardwick began with a long preamble, legal this and legal that, then started reading out the allocations. To my Uncle Gregory, her vintage coin collection, the one he used to brag about stealing from when he was 16. To Aunt Meredith, the lake house, of course. Rachel got her diamond wedding ring, even though Rachel had only ever shown up to Christmas for Instagram stories. My mom got a hefty portion of stocks. Even my cousin Danny got her car, which was hilarious since he doesn't even drive. And then Mr. Hardwick paused, cleared his throat. To my grandson Jake, he read, and my heart actually skipped. Everyone turned to look at me for the first time in an hour. My mom gave me this warm, knowing smile like, "See, I told you." Mr. Hardwick reached into a folder and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. "She instructed that this be handed to you directly," he said, holding it out. I took it slowly, feeling everyone's eyes on me. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, with my name written across the front in that familiar cursive. I hesitated for a moment, then tore it open. 2 words. That was it. Written neatly, underlined once. "Not you." That's it. No context. No explanation. Just those 2 words. I blinked, genuinely confused, thinking maybe there was more. Maybe a hidden note folded inside. A second page? But no, that was it. I looked back up at the lawyer, then at the room. No one said a word. No one laughed, or gasped, or offered any sort of explanation. And then someone did laugh. Aunt Meredith. It was this short, sharp snort she tried to cover with her hand, but I saw it. My cousin Rachel smirked. Even Danny muttered, "Yikes." I felt the blood drain from my face. My mom put her hand on my arm, but I pulled away. I stood up slowly, tucked the note back into the envelope, and walked out without saying a word. No one followed me. That was the last time I saw any of them. I didn't answer calls. I didn't respond to texts. I missed Christmas, Easter, even my mom's birthday. I moved across the state and started over. No explanations. Just silence. I figured they didn't deserve one. And then, last week, I got a message from my cousin Rachel. It was short, sharp, and entitled, "Are you seriously not coming to Grandma's one-year memorial? Everyone else is going. You're being selfish." That one message, it dug up everything I'd buried. All the confusion, the pain, the shame, the questions, but mostly the anger. Because now I need to know, why did she write that? Why did the woman I thought loved me leave me with nothing but those words? And if there's one thing my grandmother taught me, it's that if you want answers in this family, you have to dig for them yourself. So that's exactly what I've started doing. And what I've already found might just explain everything and ruin them all. I didn't respond to Rachel's message. Not at first. I stared at it on my phone, my thumb hovering over the keyboard while 100 replies swirled in my head. Some cutting, some sarcastic, some flat-out mean. But in the end, I just locked the screen and tossed the phone across the couch. I wasn't ready. Not for her, not for any of them. But something about that text, it planted a seed. Because after a year of silence, after a full year of trying to bury that day in the deepest part of my mind, all it took was one smug accusation to bring it roaring back. I hadn't told anyone what was in the envelope. Not my friends, not even my therapist. I just let them assume it was something private and emotional. I never showed them the words, "Not you." I didn't know how. How do you explain that the woman who used to tuck you in with a soft smile and call you her gentle boy decided, in the final summation of her life, that you didn't even deserve a sentence? Not even a reason. But after that message, I started needing to know why. I needed answers. And more than that, I needed to understand who in that room knew. Because someone did. Maybe multiple someones. That kind of cruelty doesn't happen in a vacuum. I started small. I went back through old photos, old letters. I pulled out every birthday card Grandma had ever sent me. There were 23 of them in a shoebox in my closet, and read them in order like chapters in a book. They were sweet, always thoughtful, always loving. Until I got to the last few. The tone didn't change dramatically, but something was missing. They got shorter, less personal. By my 25th birthday, it was just, "Happy birthday, Jake. Hope it's a great one. Love, Grandma." And that was it. No mention of our porch chats, no inside jokes, no miss you. At the time I hadn't noticed, because I figured, well, people age. She was tired. But now I saw it for what it was, distance. I kept digging. I remembered something from the will reading. How Rachel had smirked when I opened the envelope. It hadn't been surprise. It was recognition. She knew. So I started there. I created a burner account. Yeah, I know it's a little stalkerish, but I didn't care. I followed Rachel on Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn, just to see what she'd been posting around the time of Grandma's passing. Buried between wedding dress fittings and #blessed posts, I found a picture she'd posted 6 weeks before the funeral. She and her fiancé were at the lake house, grinning beside my grandmother, who looked tired and thinner than I remembered. The caption was, "Nothing like a weekend at the lake with our favorite lady. Thank you for everything, Nana." I zoomed in on the photo. In her lap, barely visible, was a manila folder. I don't know if that was the folder, the one with the will, but my gut told me it mattered. Grandma had been making decisions. And Rachel had been there. Alone. The next day, I went to see my mom. It had been almost a year since we last spoke. I hadn't even told her I was moving. But I drove back to my hometown, pulled into her driveway, and knocked on the door like a stranger. She answered with a surprised gasp and tears in her eyes. "Jake," she whispered. "Oh my God." She pulled me into a hug before I could even say anything. I let her. She smelled the same, like lavender and faint cigarette smoke, even though she quit 5 years ago. When she finally let go, she was blinking rapidly, trying to compose herself. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she said. "You didn't come to Christmas. Or the service." "I know," I said. "Can we talk?" We sat in the kitchen. She made tea, because that's what she does when something big is happening. The table still had the same chipped corner from when I was 12 and tried to open a soda bottle with a wrench. The whole house felt frozen in time, like nothing had moved in the year I'd been gone, except me. "I want to ask you something," I said, once we were both seated. "About Grandma." Her eyes dropped instantly. "She left you something, didn't she?" I asked, carefully watching her face. She nodded. "She left me some stocks. And the locket. The one with her parents' picture in it. And you were surprised?" My mom hesitated. "Not really. I knew she was planning to leave most of it to Meredith. You know how she was. She always favored the flashy ones. But not me," I said flatly. She winced. "Jake." I pulled the envelope out of my coat pocket. I had started carrying it again, like a reminder. "I never told you what she left me," I said, laying it gently on the table. "Open it." My mom looked at it like it was a bomb. She reached out slowly, slid the letter out, and read it. Her face didn't change. No shock, no confusion, just a quiet, resigned sadness. "So you knew?" I said. "No," she said quickly. "Not the note. I didn't know that. But I knew she was angry with you." "For what?" She looked at me, and I saw it then, something between guilt and fear. "She thought you were lying to her," she said. "About what?" My mom took a deep breath. "About money. About your job. About who you were dating. I don't know." Rachel and Meredith filled her head with all these things. They said you were only visiting her to get in the will, that you were manipulating her. My jaw clenched. "And you let them?" "I didn't believe them," she said, a little too quickly. "But your visits did get less frequent. You stopped coming to the lake. You didn't return her calls for a while. I was working 2 jobs, Mom. I was trying to pay off debt. You knew that." She nodded slowly. "I told her that. But she got paranoid. You know how she was when she got something in her head." I stared at her, heart pounding. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought it would blow over," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to pit you against her. Honestly, I thought there'd still be time. There wasn't. I left not long after that. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't yell. But I walked out of that house feeling colder than I had in months. Because I realized my mom had known something was wrong. And she'd chosen to wait. To hope it would fix itself. And in the meantime, her sisters had been poisoning the well. The next day, I made a decision. I was going to the memorial. Not to make peace. Not to mourn. But to confront them. I didn't RSVP. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I just showed up, dressed in black, envelope in hand. It was being held at the lake house. Of course it was. I hadn't been there since the funeral. It looked the same. White shutters, red door, the porch swing still hanging slightly crooked. There were cars parked on the grass. People standing in clusters with champagne flutes. It looked less like a memorial and more like a garden party. I slipped inside quietly. No one noticed me at first. I moved through the hallway, into the living room, and there they were, Rachel, Meredith, Uncle Greg, and a few others. All smiles. All warmth. Like nothing had ever happened. Rachel spotted me first. Her face dropped. "Jake." Conversation stopped. Heads turned. I walked forward calmly and pulled the envelope from my coat. "Nice party," I said, celebrating the woman who told me I didn't exist. Rachel blinked. "What are you talking about?" I held up the envelope. This is what I got. While you all walked away with property and jewelry and stocks, I got this." Everyone stared. A few looked uncomfortable. Meredith actually smiled. "She had her reasons," she said smoothly. "Maybe if you'd been around more." "Don't," I said. "Don't you dare make this about me. I was the one who visited her every month for 3 years while the rest of you were busy climbing ladders and throwing parties. I was the one who sat with her during her second stroke. I held her hand in the hospital. Where were you?" Meredith shrugged. "Busy. We all were." Rachel stepped forward. "Jake, maybe now isn't the time." "No," I said. "Now is exactly the time. Because I know you were here. I saw the photo. You were here before she changed the will. You were whispering in her ear. You and Meredith." Rachel's face turned red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I think I do," I said, stepping closer. "And if you're smart, you'll tell me everything. Because if you don't..." I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. Because that's when I noticed something strange. In the corner of the room, near the fireplace, was Grandma's old chest. It had been there for decades. Locked always. She used to call it her time capsule. Said it held her memories. And suddenly, I knew. I felt that whatever answers I was looking for might be in there. But before I could move toward it, someone said something behind me that made my blood run cold. "You shouldn't have come back." I turned. It was Uncle Greg. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. And from the way the others suddenly fell silent, I realized something chilling. They were all in on it. I didn't say anything. Not right away. I just looked at Uncle Greg. This man I used to call my favorite uncle when I was a kid, the one who let me ride on his shoulders at 4th of July cookouts, and I waited for him to laugh, to smirk, to blink. But he didn't. He just stared back at me with this cold, detached expression like he was looking through me, not at me. "You shouldn't have come back," he said again, a little softer now, like it wasn't a threat. Like it was advice. A warning. A truth I was supposed to accept. But I'd had enough of people telling me where I belonged. Enough of reading between the lines. Enough of swallowing silence and pretending I wasn't furious. So I did the one thing no one in my family ever seemed to expect me to do. I stayed. I walked past him, slowly, deliberately, and over to Grandma's chest near the fireplace. It looked exactly the same as it did when I was a kid. Deep mahogany wood, tarnished brass hinges, a heavy latch with a small keyhole. She used to tell me it was full of things not meant for children, which only made me more curious, of course. Once, when I was about 12, I tried to pick the lock with a hairpin. I got caught and grounded, but Grandma had smiled a little. "That kind of curiosity will either make you great," she'd said, "or get you killed." Now, I reached for the latch, not even knowing what I was hoping to find. "Don't," Meredith said sharply. I looked over my shoulder. "Why?" "It's private," she said, stepping closer. "It's not for you." "Like the letter?" I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Rachel crossed the room, grabbed my arm, not hard, but firm. "Jake, please. You've made your point. Don't turn this into some kind of scene." I looked down at her hand, then back up at her. "You already did." And then I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't cry until I got to my car and sat behind the wheel for 20 straight minutes, just trying to breathe. Because in that moment, the final puzzle pieces clicked into place, and the picture was uglier than I'd imagined. They didn't just let Grandma believe lies about me. They built them, watered them, watched them grow like weeds through her mind until whatever love she once had for me was choked out. And somehow, I'd become the villain in a story I didn't even know was being told. That night, I hit bottom. It wasn't some dramatic spiral. I didn't go on a bender or make any reckless decisions. I just shut down. I went back to my apartment, closed the curtains, and laid on my couch in the dark for hours. My phone buzzed once, probably my mom, but I didn't check it. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want apologies. I didn't even want revenge, not yet. I just wanted to feel like me again, and I didn't know how. The next day, I called in sick to work. And the day after that, and the day after that, I stopped answering texts from my friends. I stopped replying to emails. I didn't even eat much, just nibbled on crackers and drank water like my body was something I didn't recognize anymore. I spent hours pacing around my apartment, picking things up and putting them down. I kept rereading that envelope like maybe, somehow, the words would change. Like maybe they'd rearrange themselves into something softer. But they never did. Not you. Not you. And that's when the anger came back. Not loud. Not sharp. It was slow, like a fuse burning through wet rope. I didn't scream or punch walls. I just stood in the middle of my living room and whispered to myself, "Okay, fine. You want me out? You got it." But I wasn't going to disappear. Not anymore. That was the moment I decided I'd take it all back. Not the inheritance. I didn't even want the money anymore. I wanted something bigger. I wanted my name back. My dignity. My sense of worth. I wanted to become the kind of person they couldn't lie about without looking ridiculous. So I made a list. It wasn't long, but it was clear. Fix my life. Find the truth. Make them see me again, but on my terms. The first step was the hardest. Fixing my life meant facing the things I'd been ignoring since Grandma's death. I was drowning in quiet. I hadn't really worked out in years. My freelance gigs were inconsistent, and I hadn't done anything creative for myself in forever. So I started small. I made my bed. I opened the windows. I answered a friend's text. Just one. It was my college roommate, Mason, who'd messaged me weeks ago. "You still alive, man?" I replied, "Barely. Want to grab coffee?" That coffee turned into a weekly habit. Mason didn't push me to talk, but he did get me to laugh again. He told me stories about his terrible boss, his failed attempts at sourdough baking, his new girlfriend who loved conspiracy podcasts and believed every single one. And eventually, I found myself talking too. About Grandma. About the envelope. about how angry and stupid and ashamed I still felt. Mason just nodded. "You're not crazy," he said one day. "They gaslit you. Classic family politics." He said it so casually, but it felt like permission. Like maybe I wasn't crazy. I started going on runs again. Just 20 minutes at first, then 30. The first week nearly broke my legs, but by the third week, I was sleeping better. I stopped waking up at 3 a.m. with the taste of shame in my mouth. I even started eating real food again. Eggs, rice, grilled chicken, vegetables. I didn't feel amazing, but I felt alive. And then I took the next step, finding the truth. I remembered something Grandma once said to me when we were sitting on that porch swing. I'd asked her if she ever kept secrets from her kids. She laughed and said, "Of course I did. Every parent does. But the real secrets? The ones that matter? I write those down, just in case." So I started looking. I called Mr. Hardwick, the family lawyer. I told him I wanted to schedule an appointment, not as a family member, but as a private client. When I showed up at his office, he looked startled but didn't try to shoo me away. He invited me in and offered coffee. I declined. "I want to ask you something," I said. "About the will." He adjusted his glasses. "I'm not sure I'm allowed to." "I don't want the contents," I said. "I just want to know if there were changes. Last-minute ones." He paused. "Jake," he said quietly, "your grandmother made several adjustments in the last 6 months of her life. None of them were contested. But yes, the envelope was added very late." "How late?" 3 weeks before she passed." "And who was with her?" He hesitated again. "Legally, I can't tell you who was present unless you obtain permission." "From who?" "The executor." I already knew who that was. "Aunt Meredith." Of course. I left his office more frustrated than ever, but also more certain. They'd changed something. Maybe not forged, but influenced. Warped. But if there was one thing I knew about Grandma Eleanor, it was that she never just wrote things down. She recorded them too. She loved journals, notebooks, tapes. She used to joke about writing her memoirs one day. That night, I had an idea. I drove 3 hours back to the lake house. Not during the day. At night. Late. The kind of late where the road feels like it belongs to ghosts. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest. The house was dark. No one was there. I didn't break in. I didn't need to. Because I knew exactly where the spare key was, under the 3rd brick on the garden path. Same place it had always been. I let myself in quietly. The smell hit me first. Old wood, lavender, dust. It didn't smell like her anymore. That part made me pause. For a second, I just stood there in the foyer, remembering summers spent playing cards on the porch, late-night Coco, the way she used to hum old jazz tunes when she thought no one was listening. Then I got to work. I didn't touch the chest, too risky. But I went upstairs to the attic. That was her real vault. The attic door creaked. I flicked on the overhead light. Dust danced in the air like memory fragments. The room was filled with boxes, hundreds of them, labeled in her handwriting, photos, recipes, letters, receipts, keepsakes. But then I saw one box in the corner. It was newer than the others, still sealed with packing tape. Label, recordings. I pulled it down, heart pounding. Inside were tapes. Dozens. Cassettes, labeled in black marker. Most were dated. Some had names: Gregory, January; Meredith, March; Jake, May. Me. I didn't wait. I grabbed as many as I could, tucked them into my backpack, locked the house behind me, and drove. All the way home, I could barely breathe. Because I knew, finally, I might be holding the truth in my hands. And whatever was on those tapes was going to change everything. I didn't sleep that night. By the time I got home, the sun was already bleeding into the horizon, and my apartment felt too quiet, too still, like the world was holding its breath with me. I dropped my backpack on the coffee table and just stared at it. I knew what was inside, and I knew the moment I played one of those tapes, my life might split into a before and after. But I also knew I'd come too far to stop now. I dug out my old cassette player from the closet. It was dusty, buried under a stack of comic books and forgotten tech. The battery compartment was corroded, but thankfully, the power cord still worked. I plugged it in, sat on the floor like I was 12 again, and pulled out the first tape labeled in Grandma's unmistakable cursive. Jake, May. That was me. The month I'd visited her for her birthday 2 years ago. I remember that weekend like it was yesterday. How she looked thinner, but insisted on making her famous lemon cake anyway. How we sat on the dock in silence for an hour because she said words just made moments smaller. I hadn't thought it was a recording day. I slid the tape into the player and hit play. There was a soft whirring, then a faint click. And then, her voice. This is Eleanor Mayfield. Recording number 27. May 18th. Jake came by today. My heart almost stopped. I told him I didn't want to fuss, but he brought me tea and flowers anyway. He looks tired. I didn't say it, but I see the weight in his eyes. I think he's working too much. He asked about the old porch swing. Said it creaks louder now. I told him things creak more when you love them. She laughed, soft, warm, the way I remembered. Sometimes I worry he feels like he has to prove something to me, that he thinks I'm keeping score. I'm not. I just want him to know I see him. I see him. I paused the tape, my throat suddenly tight. I had to sit still for a minute and just breathe. This wasn't a woman who hated me. This wasn't someone who'd write, "Not you," without coercion. This was love. This was clarity. I played the rest. It was short, mostly reflections. She mentioned Mom. Asked herself aloud if Meredith ever really forgave her for giving Greg the coin collection. And then, as if talking to someone sitting across from her, she said, "I hope when I'm gone, they don't turn everything into a circus." She had no idea. The next few tapes were older, scratchier, but each one gave me something new. Gregory, January. Greg thinks I don't know about the second mortgage. But I do. He's always been slippery when it comes to money. Rachel, March. She brought that fiancé again. I still don't trust him. Too slick. Said something strange when I left the room. Something about getting things in order before the new will. Meredith, April. She asked if I'd reconsider the lake house. She was polite, but insistent. Almost like she'd already decided it was hers. Funny thing, she called Jake ungrateful twice, even though I hadn't mentioned him at all. I think she's trying to turn me. And then came the one that changed everything. Will revision, June. Greg and Meredith are here. They've brought Mr. Hardwick. They say it's time to finalize things. I feel rushed. I don't know if I'm thinking clearly. They've been persistent. There was a long pause. I heard papers rustling. Then, in a low voice, they told me Jake didn't come to my last appointment. That he forgot. But I remember. He was the one who drove me. He held my bag. He waited outside for 2 hours. Another pause. They said he only wants what I can give him. But I think I've made a mistake. I'm so tired. The tape ended there. I just sat there in stunned silence, the static buzzing like wasps in my ears. She'd known. She'd been manipulated. And more importantly, she recorded it. I had proof. Maybe not courtroom level, but enough. Enough to show the family, to show the world, what really happened. But I didn't rush. This wasn't going to be a scream in their faces kind of revenge. This was going to be slow, patient, surgical. I spent the next few days cleaning up my life. No more hiding under blankets. No more ignoring calls. I got a haircut. I started organizing my files. I even reached out to a few clients to get my freelance projects back on track. I wanted stability before I moved forward. Then I made a second list. This one specific, targeted. Step 1. Secure the recordings. I digitized the tapes. All of them. Made backup copies. Uploaded them to 3 cloud storage accounts and saved them on 2 separate flash drives. I hid one drive in my desk and mailed the other to Mason with no label, just instructions to open it only if something happened to me. Paranoid? Maybe. But I wasn't taking chances. Step 2. Legal advice. I wasn't naive enough to think I could sue my family and win. But I needed to know my options. So I met with a lawyer, Maria Jennings, a sharp, no-nonsense estate law attorney I found through a friend of a friend. I didn't tell her everything at first, just gave her the gist. Elderly woman, late-stage changes to a will, family pressure, audio evidence suggesting coercion. She leaned forward, interested. "You'd be surprised how often I hear this," she said. "What kind of evidence?" I pulled out a transcript I'd typed up from the most damning tape. She read it twice, eyebrows rising. "This could absolutely be challenged," she said. "It won't be easy. And the fact that it's posthumous makes it harder. But if you want to pursue it, I'd start gathering more emails, texts, anything that shows motive or manipulation." That gave me an idea. Step 3. Bait the snakes. I logged back into my burner account and messaged Rachel. "Hey, I want to talk. I think I might have overreacted at the memorial. Maybe we could meet for coffee." She replied in under 10 minutes. "Sure. I'm glad. It's been too long." We met at a cozy cafe downtown. She wore oversized sunglasses and hugged me like we were cousins on good terms. "I'm really glad you reached out," she said, sipping a macchiato she didn't pay for. "I think Grandma's passing just brought out a lot of emotions in everyone." I nodded. "Yeah, and I've been doing some thinking. About the will." Her smile froze for a second. I don't know if she really meant to exclude me," I said. "But if you say she did, I believe you." "There. A test." She took the bait. "She definitely did," Rachel said quickly. "I was there. She said she didn't want anything going to someone who wasn't family-oriented." Her words, not mine. "Liar." "She said that?" I asked, pretending to be hurt. "She did," Rachel said, looking at me over the rim of her cup. She was getting sharper toward the end, less tolerant of certain behaviors. "Like what? Loyalty? Truth?" I leaned back and gave her a sad smile. "Thanks for being honest." That night, I transcribed the conversation and saved the audio recording from my phone. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was more proof that she knew Grandma's intentions were changed and that she was willing to lie to maintain the story. Step 4. Control the narrative. I created a website. Simple, clean, anonymous. Just a homepage with a title. "The Truth About Eleanor Mayfield's Will." I didn't make it public yet, but I uploaded the digitized tapes, the transcripts, and a carefully written letter explaining what happened. Names redacted for now, just enough to outline the betrayal. My goal wasn't to destroy reputations, yet. My goal was leverage. Step 5. Find allies. I called my cousin Daniel. Yeah, that cousin, the one who lived in the basement. The oddball. He and I weren't close, but he was Grandma's actual favorite. He just didn't know it. She always gave him the biggest slices of pie, remembered his comic book release dates, even took him to therapy when his mom refused to go. When he picked up the phone, I said, "Hey, want to hear something weird about Grandma?" He met me that weekend. I showed him the recordings. He listened to 3 tapes in complete silence, then looked up with wide eyes. "They lied," he said. "They all lied." I nodded. "I need your help." He didn't even hesitate. And just like that, I had my first ally. We made a plan. A good one. And it starts next week. They think they've buried the past. They have no idea what's about to come crawling out of the dirt. The funny thing about revenge is that people expect it to be loud, explosive, a scream in a quiet room. But the best kind, the kind that really hurts, it's quiet, cold, methodical, like water dripping on stone until it cracks down the middle. I didn't want fireworks. I wanted consequences. So Daniel and I set everything into motion with the same patience Grandma used to teach me how to bake. Slow, precise, careful. He helped me cross-reference timelines, build backups, dig through old emails, and compile a clean, chronological report. I never expected him to be such a detail freak, but apparently years of staying quiet in the background gave him a front-row seat to every family lie, and he remembered everything. Turns out, he'd been keeping receipts of his own. The final trigger came in the form of a letter. A typed, formal document I mailed anonymously to Hardwick and Company, the law firm that had executed Grandma's will. Inside it, I included 2 things. A notarized affidavit claiming I had reason to believe Eleanor Mayfield's will had been altered under coercion and misinformation. A private URL leading to my hidden website. I knew Mr. Hardwick well enough to know he was old school. He wouldn't ignore that. 3 days later, I got an email from my attorney, Maria Jennings. They've reached out, asking to discuss matters privately, which is code for "We know you're right, but let's clean this up quietly." She smiled when we met in her office. "You played this smart, Jake. No empty threats, no public tantrums. Just evidence." "Thanks," I said, "but I'm not done. Because I didn't just want to reverse the will. I wanted them to feel what I felt, publicly. That sick feeling in your gut when you realize everyone's looking at you and no one's clapping. The memorial rededication was my chance. After I leaked the site to Mr. Hardwick, I sent the link to exactly one more person. Pastor Lyle, the man officiating the planned 1-year memorial remembrance service that Meredith and Rachel were organizing at Grandma's old church. The same church where she'd been married, baptized her kids, and taught Sunday school for 30 years. Pastor Lyle had known me since I was 7. He once caught me trying to sneak Oreos from the church kitchen and let me off with a wink. When he saw the tapes, the transcripts, and the full timeline, he called me directly. "Jake," he said, "I'm heartbroken. I always suspected something was wrong with how things were handled, but I never imagined this." He paused. I'd like to say a few words during the memorial. Is that all right? I gave him permission. And then I made the final move. The family newsletter. Meredith had this habit. Every quarter, she'd send out a massive family email with updates, reflections, prayer requests, and lots of thinly veiled self-congratulations. She CC'd everyone, always forgot to be CC, and loved to add, "Feel free to forward this to any relatives I missed." So Daniel and I did just that. Only this time, we were the ones who hit send. Subject line: Eleanor Mayfield's truth. Please read. The body of the email was short and calm. After careful review and legal consultation, we've come into possession of recordings and documents that suggest Eleanor Mayfield's final will was influenced under false pretenses. We believe she was intentionally misled about key family relationships by certain individuals who stood to benefit financially. To honor her memory, we are making this information available to all relatives. We encourage you to listen to her own words. With respect, Jake and Daniel Mayfield. Then we sat back and waited. The next 48 hours were glorious. It started with the phone calls. I got 13 the first day. Not from Rachel, not from Meredith, not from Greg, but from cousins, second cousins, in-laws. People I hadn't spoken to in years. People I barely remembered. One message stuck with me. "Jake, I just listened to the tapes. I'm so sorry. I never knew. I wish I had." That was from Aunt Judith, Grandma's youngest sister. She cried on the voicemail. She said she always thought something was off, but didn't want to stir up drama. She thanked me for having the guts. The best part? Rachel cracked first. I found out through Daniel. He'd been quietly watching her social media. One night, her fiancé posted a story from a bar with the caption, "Some people will throw you under the bus and still expect you to drive them home." The next day, Rachel deleted every single photo that had anything to do with Grandma. A week later, she posted a vague quote on Instagram. "Accountability isn't cruelty." Her comments were flooded. "Is this about Jake? Girl, we heard the tapes. You owe someone an apology." She turned her account private the same day. Then came Meredith. That took longer. She ignored everything at first. She tried to spin it, claimed the recordings were edited, that Grandma was confused in her final months. But it didn't stick. Too many people had heard her calm, steady voice. Too many heard her remember that I'd driven her to appointments. Too many heard her question Meredith's sudden push for legal changes. The worst part for Meredith? Hardwick and Company dropped her. They released a formal statement saying they were reviewing new information and that they had no further comment. I heard from Maria that the firm was considering voiding the amendment to the will altogether. If they did, everything Grandma had originally intended, including my portion, would be reinstated. Not because I fought for money, but because I fought for truth. And that leads me to the final piece. The memorial. I almost didn't go. I didn't want to cause a scene. But Pastor Lau convinced me. So I went. Sat quietly in the back row, dressed in a dark suit, envelope in my coat pocket. Not the "not you" one. I'd burn that. This one held the full transcription of Grandma's kindest tape. The one where she said, "I see him. I just want him to know I see him." The service was short, beautiful, filled with hymns, soft piano, old stories. And then Pastor Lal stood and cleared his throat. "Before we close today," he said, "I'd like to read something. Not my own words. Eleanor's." The room went silent. And he read it, word for word. Her voice, her truth. No accusations, no names, just the facts. Her love for me, her doubts, her slow realization that she might have been misled. The air grew heavy. People shifted uncomfortably. Some cried. Some stared straight ahead. When it was over, he folded the paper and placed it on the pulpit. "She left this not just for Jake," he said softly, "but for all of us. To remember her not just by what we got from her, but by what she gave. Her stories, her trust, her honesty." And then, without saying a word, Meredith stood up and left. No one followed. Afterward, people came up to me. Some hugged me. Some apologized. Some just looked away. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need validation. Because I'd already won. Not with rage. Not with a lawsuit. With the truth. And now, every time I go back to the lake house, because yes, the will is being amended, and the house will be mine once probate clears, I sit on the old porch swing and listen to the breeze. Sometimes, I play her recordings like she's still here, sipping sweet tea beside me. And every time I hear her say, "I see him," I smile. Because now, the whole world does too. I wasn't written out. I was just waiting for the right moment to write myself back in.